Welcome to Redistricting in Michigan. The League of Women Voters Oakland Area and the League of Women Voters of Michigan Education Fund is delighted to present this town hall. My name is Deb Macon, and I'm a resident of West Bloomfield. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker, Linda Hoff. Linda serves in two roles within the League of Women Voters. Linda is one of the newest vice presidents of the state board governing all of the local leagues in the state of Michigan. And at the same time, she's serving as the League of Women Voters president in Flint. A number of years ago, Linda was one of the national level leaders to be part of developing League of Women Voters of the United States agricultural policy. Linda has a Bachelor's of Science from Lawrence Technological University and a Master of Public Administration from the Rackman Graduate School through the University of Michigan, Flint. Linda is a longtime advocate for women and girls, and especially an environmental activist. Linda is especially trained among many colleagues around the state to present town halls just like this in consortium with a number of Michigan nonprofits and organizations. She will give a thorough introduction and also prepare for a question and answer session. Thank you so much for being here, and with this, Linda.
Thank you, Dan. So glad to see a growing number of people that keep entering, so thank you. Thanks for coming to this town hall meeting. I'm here, as Deb told you, representing the League of Women Voters of Michigan. The League, if you are not aware of it right now, is a nonpartisan organization. We encourage informed and active participation of citizens in government. This year we celebrated our 95th year as an organization, and we hope to be around for another 100. Unless, of course, miraculously, there is no need for us. The League does three types of activity. In our election-oriented work, I usually use my hands for this. We register new voters, we publish voter guides, we do an online information site called Vote 411. Have any of you used our vote411.org? A few of you have. If you haven't been there, check it out before the next election. It's too late today. But we go online about 30 days before an election, and you can check out everything that will be on your ballot. Every candidate that's running for elected office gets invited to participate. So in that one, we stay entirely nonpartisan. On this hand, we do our advocacy work. So we study issues. Deb told you I worked on the national group for our agriculture position update. That was a huge, huge undertaking, and I learned so much, and my diet has changed so much since I did it. In any case, this side over here, after study, after reaching consensus, then we can advocate on issues of public policy. And then there's our education work, right down the middle. We try and bring a balanced approach of information to everybody so that you can make decisions that are in your best interest in how you feel society should be. Okay? Today, we're doing education, so hopefully by the end of this presentation, you think I did a fair job presenting some unbiased information. So, redistricting, what is it? You're going to see, I have to look at my script, by the way. This is a very regimented program that we put together, and because we have a bunch of different speakers going all around the state, we have a script that we're trying to adhere to make sure everybody gets the same message. And I'm a terrible script reader. I'm good off the cuff, so sometimes you'll find me wandering a little bit. Okay, so the lines for Michigan's U.S. congressional, here we go. Congressional, state Senate, and state House districts are reviewed and redrawn every 10 years. It's following the national census after population shifts are identified and published. Redistricting is the process of drawing the lines for congressional legislative districts. How district lines are drawn determines which voters reside in what congressional legislative districts. In Michigan, we currently have 14 U.S. congressional districts, having lost one following the last census. We also have 38 Michigan Senate seats and 110 Michigan House districts. Quote from Oregon says it succinctly when they say that redistricting is probably the most important political process in the decade that most people know too little about. So we're glad that you're here tonight to learn a little bit more about redistricting. So what laws govern how legislative maps are drawn? Federal laws. Well, we have the Constitution. So they basically federal laws focus on two key concepts. One is that an equal number of persons need to live in each district. And two, that race and ethnicity are not substantially disrupted in a manner that dilutes a minority voting power. Those practices would be normally called cracking and packing. We won't get into that too much. For the most part, the laws are centered around the concept of equality and fairness for every citizen. In 1964, the U.S. Supreme Court established the one-person, one-vote concept to apportionment. That determines the number of persons in each district. Congressional districts within a state should be as equal as practicable to ensure that each person's vote is weighted equally. The smallest deviations can be challenged in court and must be justified by the state. Challenges of less than 1% have been upheld in the U.S. Supreme Court. In the 1980s, New Jersey court ruled that the state had not made a good faith effort to maintain population equality. And so they had to redraw lines. Now, population per representative. This was asked earlier in the evening about how many representatives, and this is terrible of me because I don't remember how many we had when we first started redistricting for the House, or districting for the House. But going from 1793, so that might have been the start then, we had just under 30,000 people under each House district. And at the time, Congress thought that should be the limit, that it should be around 30,000. In 1913, it had gone up to 210,000, and after the 2010 census, the ideal size for a Michigan district was 706,000, plus a little bit. So from 2000 to 2010, the U.S. population saw a 7% increase, but Michigan saw a 0.6% drop. That's what caused us to lose a seat. So state requirements vary. Concepts employed by state include contiguity. 23 states say that your districts need to be contiguous. Can't have breaking points. You need to have compactness. And you need to have community of interest. Michigan laws on redistricting. In 1996, Public Act 463 and Public Act 221 in 1999 set forth guidelines that are still used today. Current statutory guidelines for congressional and state legislative districts ask that districts comprise convenient and contiguous territory, that they break as few county, city, and township boundaries as reasonably possible. I want you to remember those terms when we get to some maps. And that in the case of multiple districts within a city or township, the districts are as compact as possible. But the legislature may modify these statutes at any time. There were some guidelines regarding state legislative districts in the 1999 law that called for strict population equity, upholding the Voting Rights Act. Preserving the political boundaries and contiguity, compactness, those same things. But in 2001, legislators chose to make state guidelines non-binding. And in 2002, the Michigan Supreme Court upheld that decision. So, the 1982 decision. In 1963, Michigan Constitution established an 8-member commission. So we've already had an 8-member commission already once in our history. Some of you may remember that, for redistricting. They had 4 persons from each party representing the 8. Anyone want to guess what happened? Does anybody remember what happened? Yeah, they couldn't come up with a decision. They kept ending in a tie and having to go to the courts. So in Article 7, Section Article 4, Section 2 of the Michigan Constitution, the state constitution, includes provisions of apportionment. The legislative districts are based on each county's share of the state's population and the state's land area. So in the 80s, in 1982, after they couldn't decide again on boundaries, the court ended up ruling all of Article 4 null and void because of that statement of the state's land area. So they said the premise of the argument and the boundaries and the rules was null and void because of that, after the one person, one vote that we just discussed. So they told the legislature, if you want it fixed, you need to fix it. And here we are today in 2015. Now, oversight in Michigan. It's pretty simple. Governor can veto plans if he's not happy, or if we ever get we've had females, sorry, he or she are not happy with the lines. They're generally along partisan lines. That doesn't surprise anybody, but he does have the ability to veto lines. And in the event that we can't get agreement at the legislature, it goes to the Supreme Court. We know that very well because we've done it numerous times in our history. So what are the problems with the current system? If you haven't figured it out yet, partisan politicians manipulate the district lines. The partisan nature of redistricting leaves the state with district lines drawn to consolidate political power rather than to group together citizens with common interests. That was a quote from Nolan Finley of Detroit News earlier this year. Allowing politicians to draw their own voting maps brings on all these. According to the Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University School of Law, how we elect our representatives is how we run our government. America is a representative democracy, which means how we put those representatives in office is essential to how our democracy works. Now, this isn't a new concept, but before I give too much credence to Governor Jerry, I'm going to point out that Patrick Henry in 1789 tried to draw lines so that he could exclude James Madison. So he was the first instance that we saw way back in 1789. So political parties want political advantage for one party or another. Certainly it's happened in Michigan. The term gerrymander came because when Elbridge Gerry signed this map into law, people thought it looked like a salamander. Thus the name gerrymandering. It's the process of identifying the lines to get a particular result. Here's some examples that came by a person by the name of Stephen Nass, and it was posted in the Washington Post. It's about as clear-cut as you can get in how you can divide up a population and get different results. So the first graph's to demonstrate a particular population. 60% blue, 40% red. That's not meant to be political. That's just to give you a clear vision. So the first graph is that. The next example, blue wins 3 and red wins 2. Perfect representation. Nobody's alienated, right? Then you go into the third example where the blue wins all 5 districts. It's compact, but it's not fair. In the final example, red wins 3 districts and blue wins 2. Neither fair nor compact. Does that make sense? Now, this came from the New York Times article in 2013 following the last census. And they took the nation, you can see the outline of our country, right? And they identified the states that had the most severe gerrymandering going on. The darker the color, the more severe the gerrymander. Vote totals in the 10 gerrymandered states were only 7% more Republican than Democrat. Yet they resulted in 76% more Republican seats. So overall, those 10 states created 109 Republican seats for Congress and 62 Democratic seats. An ideal, based on the actual population, would have been 91 Republicans and 80 Democrats, or an 18-seat shift, just in those 10 states. So now in Michigan, our congressional districts, if you look at competitiveness, the safe seats breakdown, there's some data that was broken down. I'm trying to see if I cited who did this. I didn't put a citation, so I apologize. Basically, the safe seats defy competition. So partisan decision-making made safe seats. And of the Michigan's congressional 14-seat delegation, 4 seats were Democratic base of 60% or higher, and 9 seats were Democratic base of less than 50%. Ultimately, you ended up with 9 Republican and 5 Democrat safe seats. That was based on less than 50% of the base of the opposing party. But only 36% were safe seats, and the safe seats were considered anywhere between 45 and 55%. So right down the middle, it was a fair competitive race. So out of our 14, only 5 were actually considered competitive. Some of you happen to know this one, I bet. So our maps kind of change based on our audience. This one's an ideal map. Now, I don't know if anyone here thinks this is compact. It is contiguous, just barely. But that's what your District 14 looks like. This one would be considered a packed district. This one you're not really meant to see all the detail. It's just to show you what the districts look like. So these are your congressional districts. And if you look at that one long, skinny one that's here in the thumb, which way is my, there we go. That's my district. But the Detroit area looks far worse. There's your Detroit area. Again, I'm going to guess that most people in this room know from experience what this looks like. Now, congressional distribution. It's not a one-sided thing. It's the party that's in power. So you have a couple examples here. One's from 1992, when the Democrats controlled Texas. The ideal thing that we're trying to show here is in this instance, the total votes for Congress were matched. They were at 49% each. But the seats won were by far different. Then in 2012, here in Michigan, we had a similar kind of thing where we had 46 and 51%. So we had more people voting Democratic, yet they only got 5 of the seats, 5 of the 14 seats. And that's because of how the maps were drawn. So there's a quick little look at whether or not we think this is a fair game. So you're going to see that the distribution of the seats won versus how the votes were cast. So in the U.S. House in 2014, 49% of the vote went Democrat, yet they only got 5 of the seats. The state House, there were 48.8 Republican, yet they got 63 seats. The state Senate, almost an even match on votes, yet the seats won are by far different. So there's your Michigan Senate map. So remember that our Senate, we have 38 members of our Senate. Population varies from a little over 212,000 to 263,000 in each district. Senators are elected at the same time as the governor and serve a 4-year term, but they're term limited at 2 terms. So as you see, you get more and more. You don't see a lot of blatant stuff until you get into the severely populous areas. And there you go. There's your Metro Detroit. And the closer you get into Detroit and around Detroit, the worse it looks, with pockets of other things going on. Like in Macomb County, you got that little green island in the middle of that yellow. All right. So when you look at the House, you have 110 seats. You see a whole lot more irregularity in your lines. The populations range from 77,000 to 91,000 residents. You're allowed to have a broader distribution in the state than you are in congressional seats. Congressional, they want you to have as close to the actual population as possible. In the state legislature, you can have as much as a 10% swing, and it's still considered okay. So from your ideal, you can go 5% down or 5% up, so you can have a 10% swing in your population. So as you all know, representatives are selected on 2-year terms, and they are also term limited after 3 terms. And there's your Metro Detroit districts again. It helps if you see the maps, I think. So what happened in Michigan, and what was the result? So unlike the process that we've seen in California recently, Michigan's was not an open process. The maps were drawn behind closed doors. Eventually, they had the legislature had 2 public meetings to present the maps. The 2 meetings in total lasted an hour and a half, and there was no public input allowed and no inputting or suggestions into maps. They were just presented. That was how our process was done in Michigan. The Senate Redistricting Committee for Michigan had 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats. The House Redistricting Committee had 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats. That's putting the fox in charge of the hen house, and the league considers that a conflict of interest. So redistricting can impact public policy. So we're going to show a couple of examples in education and transportation funding and how those have been affected. So here's your education funding. So you can see that over the years, and we have to put a disclaimer here to be fair, funding can change for a variety of reasons, and we've seen the need for funding changes in Michigan, certainly. But officials are responsible for deciding where the money goes, and especially when it gets tight. So the dotted line shows the inflation-adjusted spending that we do in education. So while actual dollar amounts are almost where they were between 2003 to 2013, your real amount, we all know that we live with inflation every day, was $8.98. So our schools still are struggling. Transportation is almost the same. So you had 216 to 217, but in real dollars that are inflation adjusted, it's $1.74. We all know what happened when Prop 1 hit this last May. 24.1% of registered voters participated in that election. So 1/4 of our voters voted 4-1 down. And it's because it was, you can name, the pundits have tossed it around and tossed it around. But if you think about it, it was a constitutional amendment. And it was what we call a Christmas tree bill. It had so many things onto it to try and get people to buy into it. So this was, we're going to get into the ways you make a constitutional amendment change. But in this case, it was brought to us from the legislature. But by the time they had to make all the little horse trades to get it to the people, it was so cumbersome that people just didn't trust it. And so they voted it down. But 1/4 of our population made that decision for the rest of us. So other areas of public policy that are noticeably impacted, environment. One current example of that right now is dealing with the regulation of solar energy. Human services. Our legislature has to decide how we're going to fund health care. Voting rights. And civil rights, such as equal pay, equal work. Elections and redistricting have consequences on the policies and budgets that are adopted. Why does redistricting matter? If you care about representation and you care about political power, then you should care about redistricting. That's a quote from the Brennan Center. So the solution, let me tell them how to do it. No. Change the rules so the process is fair, transparent, and impartial. Gosh, it doesn't seem like it should be that hard. So for 95 years, the League of Women Voters has stood up for the protection and equality of all voters. So the range of redistricting options: legislative, an advisory commission, and an independent commission. Those are pretty much the three basic forms, and there's hybrids that other states have come up with. Right now, ours is the legislative option. So in the legislative option, the legislature committee creates the plan, submits it in the form of a bill to the full legislature. After it gets final approval, it goes to the governor, where it either gets a signature or a veto. In the event of an impasse, in our case, the Michigan Supreme Court has to get involved and has done so many times. An advisory commission, there are a number of examples of this option across the U.S. Essentially the commission drafts a plan, but the legislature and the governor still need to approve it. And an independent commission, different formulas, but essentially non-office holding citizens draw the maps, and legislative approval is not required. 27 states have legislative commissions. There we are. 17 states have advisory commissions. Six states have an independent commission. And I've identified them. This I'm going to show you the partisan, because most people are amazed that 4 of those 6 with an independent commission are Republican states. Only 2 are Democrat states. Alaska has a 5-member commission where the governor appoints 2, the president of the Senate appoints 1, and the Speaker of the House appoints 1. Then the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court appoints 1. At least 1 member must be a resident of each judicial district, and no member may be a public employee or official. In Arizona, they also have a 5-member commission. The Commission on Appellate Court Appointees creates a pool of 25 nominees, 10 from each of the 2 largest parties, and 5 that are not a part of either of those 2 parties. The highest ranking officer of the House appoints 1 from the pool. Then the majority leader of the House appoints 1. Then the highest ranking officer of the Senate appoints 1. It goes on and on. But it's a process that for Arizona works. If the 4 deadlock, in the end, the 4 appoint a 5th person from a pool of candidates. And if there's a deadlock, then the Commission on Appellate Court appoints another chair. So the fifth person on that Arizona commission gets appointed by the first 4. California is a 14-member commission. That's a relatively new one as well. They were in 2008. They've been through 1 map drawing. They've learned a lot in California, and we've learned from them. Yeah, they're 14 members, 5 are Republican, 5 are Democrats, and 4 are from neither party. The interesting thing about California is they had 36,000 people apply to be part of that commission. They had 100 public hearings in 38 cities over 8 months. They allowed 20,000 comments from the public and groups, and there were no private meetings. The map making was all done at open meetings. Goes on and on. I can tell you more stories, but we don't have time for those. So if anybody wants more of the stories, let me know. So the results in California, which has an independent process, voters by a margin of 2-1 favor the new process. 2012, there was a significant turnover of elected offices, yet the partisan ratio did not change. I looked this up because this presentation is very dynamic because it changes as we do things and people ask us questions and we go back and we look them all up. So in 2010, there were 28 Republicans and 52 Democrats. Now count that up, that's 80 seats. Michigan, we have 110 state house seats. California, as big as it is, only has 80. They have the largest in the nation. Anyway, currently, there are 28 Republicans and 52 Democrats. So it didn't change the outcome. But what it did do is it brought more people engaged in the process. It brought about more compact districts and fairer districts. Didn't change the partisan makeup though, which I find amazing that it didn't touch that at all. Okay, Arizona. That's what spurred all this on with the education meetings across the state, because that ruling came this year. So in 2000, Arizona voters approved an amendment to their constitution that established the citizens' independent redistricting. Legislators didn't think that was very fair, so they sued, and they just won. The citizens won in the Supreme Court this June. Supreme Court said is so acting, Arizona voters sought to restore the core principle of Republican government, that the voters should choose the representative, not the other way around. That came out of the courts. So we can't even claim our own catch line. Representative democracy. These came out of all things, study.com, but I found them very telling. So there has to be an opportunity for genuine competition in the selection of leadership. If people think that elections are rigged or predetermined, that there can be no meaningfully honest competition, they don't tend to show up to vote. Second, there has to be free communication among the people in the press. And third, the voters have to believe that a meaningful choice exists. So you have to have competitive districts. And then I'll go back to this for a second. Michigan Radio did a poll back in August, and there were 600 people in their poll, so probably, I don't know what the standard deviation there was of it, but they asked about redistricting. Satisfied with the current system. 48% said they were satisfied. Somewhat or very unsatisfied, 37%. 67% said too political. 21% said it was okay. And 63% supported an independent commission. The goal. These are kind of lofty. We want to make sure every vote counts. We want to make sure every voter has a voice. That our elections represent what the people want, and that our government truly represents us. Now, how to change redistricting. There's two ways to do it. Both require a constitutional amendment. The first would be a legislative proposal that our current legislature, or whatever at that time, decides that they can actually get together and work on a solution, and then put it in front of, I see the man laughing in the back, yes, and put it in front of the voters for a yay or a nay. That didn't work too well earlier this year on just our roads. Or you have a citizen-driven initiative. And is she here still, the person who was doing the signatures? Oh, yeah. So we were already having that outside, so we had somebody doing the petition. So a petition drive. Petition drive, to put it on the statewide ballot, would require 400,000 signatures. So it has to show a true commitment from the people. I'm kind of anxious because it's on Ohio's ballot today. Ohio is voting on an independent redistricting. I'm anxious to see how that works out. Okay. Just for the record, California's initiative passed in 2008. Arizona's passed in 2000. Washington State's passed in 1982. And Idaho and Montana, 1994. So, the League of Women Voters. We do have a position, and this is an educational event. So in the interest of full disclosure, and so people can't come back and say, oh, they had an agenda, we're letting you know right up front, we actually do have a position on this. So we're just letting you know that it's there. In summary, partisan politicians manipulate elections. Keeps themselves and their party in power. That's conflict of interest. The process of drawing maps should be transparent, impartial, and fair. When we vote, we want our elections to be fair, our votes to count, and our voices to be heard. What can you do? Well, when you came in today, there was a sign-in sheet that's being kept at the local league level, and then there were sign-up sheets. So if you want to be part of a campaign just to be informed, you can even just write that down. So you can write letters to the editor, you can post on Facebook, you can make phone calls, and you can knock on doors. And you can learn more. So after the middle of this month, our video should be online. I don't know when this video is going to be online. Ours will be online at the second half of this month, though. But Citizens Research Council has a lot of information that you'll find accessible reading. It's not real complicated. It's not full of legalese. If you, either way, whether you think that this is great and you want to share that with the world, or whether you think it's a pile of bunk, you can tell that to the world. That's the whole point of doing an educational campaign. And then just because I tend to over-research everything, Loyola Law School has an All About Redistricting page. Now, the professor that's in charge of this page is actually on hiatus right now. But a lot of information still stands. And these are all resources that he gives on that page where if you want more information, you can get it. But he highlights Department of Justice, Census Bureau, and the Brennan Center for Justice as the 3 key places to look. So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. And I want to entertain any questions that you might have. Hand up at the ready. Look at that. Don't make them too hard. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm tired. No.
What is the average cost of putting something on the ballot statewide?
The estimate for cost, go ahead. You want that on mic?
I wonder what the average cost of putting an item on a statewide ballot would be.
That's estimated to be $10 million.
10 million.
Mm-hmm. Last week, someone asked how much money the league was giving. I said, do you know how broke we are? We're a grassroots organization. If we had $10 million, who knows what we'd do with it? I could just think of all kinds of fun stuff. You have 2 questions back there.
You mentioned a petition. We saw a petition on fracking when we came in, but we didn't see anything on redistricting.
Right. No, there is not a petition drive right now on redistricting. I was just pointing that out as an example that that's how it's done. That's how a citizen-driven initiative gets on the ballot. Just that way. I'm right behind her, too.
I'm in favor of this, and this is all good and well, but if people don't get off their butts and get out and vote, when you get less than 10%, it'd be interesting to see today on the places that voted what the percentage was. I would guess it's going to be less than 10% in almost every case. So this is all good and well, but if people don't vote, it doesn't mean that tinker's damned.
No, I totally agree with you on that one. You have to get out and change it. People have to be, the question is, are people mad enough that they want things different? Do you want things to change? And the question might be, I don't know. You know, that's what part of doing these.
Yeah, I came here for a reason, because I am very upset with what politicians did. I vote Republican. I should be voting that way with Novi, okay, moderate Republican. But instead, what the politicians did was gave the Democrats, you know, all the credit and everything, which is wrong. Gerrymandering is the wrong thing to do. We must change this. I would like to know how to do this, how to change, how to get it back to Republican. Right.
I guess a comment and a question. I think fairer redistricting would also help move a lot of the candidates to the center, because right now, if you're in a safe district, then you have to win the primary, and the best way to win the primary is to be more extreme conservative in a conservative district and more liberal in a liberal district. But if you also have to worry about winning the general election, then you can't go too far to either end and still hope to win the general election. So I think that's a big plus. My question is, there's a certain amount of sort of what you might call natural gerrymandering because of the concentration of Democrats in large urban areas. And so some people have said that nationally, even if we got rid of gerrymandering, probably the House, the federal House would remain Republican, and the Senate would remain Democrat, just based on the number of voters in each state, but also the distribution across urban and suburban areas. So has anybody looked at that for Michigan? How much sort of natural gerrymandering would end up causing a concentration of Democratic voters in the large urban areas and therefore cause some of these statistics to still not work out the way you think they should, even with fair redistricting?
No, we really haven't done a concentrated study on it. But what we have, to your point, you do have certain concentrations, but those concentrations are something that people, for the most part, make a choice where they want to live. And so if you have those competitive districts, if you keep those districts compact, but you still have a certain population that you have to reach, you're going to pick up some periphery things, right? So and when you have to go in and delve and break up a community, you're supposed to minimize that disruption. So by definition, you would make some of those, the way it's supposed to be done, you would have some of that blending and hybridization going on by sheer volume of people. Does that make sense? But when you look at District 14, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. So our whole goal right here is to make them follow what their own rules have said, and to make our districts competitive so that the people are actually voting for the representatives, and the representatives are accountable to their people. Because we don't have that when we don't have competitive districts. When you have 5 out of 14 that are competitive, you don't have people that have to respond to their voters.
Hi, how are you? I have 2 questions. The first question is, I know there is no ballot initiative right now with
Correct.
regards to redistricting. Is there any effort out there that you know of right now that is going to try to fund a ballot initiative for 2016?
There are a lot of rumblings. The League has not made any commitment, and these other groups. I think a lot of these groups are kind of waiting to see how these education campaigns, we're not the only one doing them either. Common Cause is doing some, and a couple other groups I think are doing campaigns across the state, educational ones. Ours are focused entirely on redistricting. That's our big initiative this year. There are people who want to see change, but I think they have to see that there's support for it. As we said, that's 400,000 signatures and $10 million. That's an investment. But yeah, there's no decision. That, although I'm told that there should be something after the first of the year. If a decision's going to be made, it'll be made after the first of the year.
Okay, and my second question was, I noticed, I think you said 37 states have the same process that we do with regards to our legislators deciding our districts. Why is it here that Michigan, I know this is one of the worst states with regards to gerrymandering, opposed to some of the other 37 states that use the same process? So
of the 27 states that have the legislative districts, it's really, you have 10 that are severely gerrymandered. Actually, I think there were 6 that were on the severe list, maybe, and 3 or 4 that were on the not as severe list. I think that some just have a different kind of ethic that they go about it with. They just respond differently.
If the two houses,
if the houses are divided,
that would also minimize
sure.
it.
But when you're doing the research and you're reading about each of these states, which my mind at this age doesn't like log at all, a lot of them put in different kind of ethical things that can and cannot be done. And they actually adhere to them for the most part, which is kind of a neat concept.
My question is kind of piggybacked on what he had asked about an initiative actually starting. And you said most likely the first of the year. Now, will it be a group, like you mentioned Common Cause? I mean, where does initiative, how does it happen? What?
I think, well, and I can't speak entirely to it because I'm not a person that's involved in that. My impression is, and what I've seen with others, and you'll tell me too on the ban fracking initiative, is it's a coalition of groups that put forth. So they work and they combine their resources to educate the public, because each one of the groups has a different niche market that we talk to and that we interact with. So you'd find that it would be a coalition of groups. So again, I want to say though, so that you can stay in the loop, if you're interested in staying in the loop, fill out the form and at least put your email on there, and they won't harass you on other things. They'll just talk to you about what's going on with redistricting, so you're staying in the loop on that. But we'll certainly be putting out press releases as soon as a decision's made too. But that's not a league decision to make.
Okay. Of the states that are the same as Michigan, and although Michigan seems to be the worst of them all, how many of these states, if you know, are governed by term limits?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know, Eva, you might even know that.
Question with this form, with this form, I understand the first two. I want to be kept informed, or I'll write a letter to the editor. But phone calls to whom and knock on doors for what?
Those are all standard practices in any initiative. So if an initiative does happen, you'd be part of a database of people that would be contacted.
So first of all, an initiative has to happen.
Mm-hmm. And you had a question up here too, right? Did that get answered?
No, it didn't.
Okay, so I think she's got the mic with someone else, but we'll come up to you.
Okay, I've never been to a League of Women Voters meeting before, but I'm angry about an esoteric issue that some of you may think about, and I'm curious as to how it happens to be the changes that were made to the Michigan Nonprofit Corporation Act in the lame duck session of the legislature last year on December 14th. The governor signed it on December 31, and it affects every nonprofit corporation, and I'm involved in representing community associations, condos and cooperatives and homeowner associations. And the changes were absolutely, in my opinion, heinous, and they were designed to benefit insurance companies and developers primarily, okay? And how would I get the League of Women Voters or somebody like that to be aware, because there was no real public testimony. The whole real property section of the State Bar and people in community association law knew nothing about this. It just got passed in the darkness of December. And I'm trying to let people know, and I've written the governor's assistant, and how do you raise hell, so to speak? How do you get the league, for example, to be interested in something that affects tens of thousands of people that live in a subdivision or a community association or a condo? Is my question.
Well, I'm going to say it's a little off topic from redistricting, but I feel your pain. That same lame duck session, and so we're going to, but that's what I'm going to say. The response to that is if your legislators had to respond to you and report to you and were accountable to you as citizens, you would find less of those shenanigans. But that goes into redistricting, that goes into money in politics. Those are all issues the league is looking at right now. They're all issues that we investigate. They're all issues that we do end up advocating for as well.
And you can join the league.
Thank you. That was my next line. We do have men in the league.
As a matter of fact, I wanted to get my colleagues' attention to say exactly that. The League of Women Voter process is that those of us who live right in the community meet just as this and create our lists of action items that we forward to the state leaders, who include Linda and Eva Packard. I did serve in that role at one point. So there is a process, so please make sure Eva and Linda have your contact information to do exactly that.
And like most grassroots organizations, sometimes our priorities change based on the passion of the people that are active. So my passions are environment and education and children and girls. So those are big on my list. Now I still look at other things, but those are my passions. So I'm human. What am I going to prioritize? Right? So if you want to join the league and get involved with us, we're happy to have you. We're happy to have any one of you here tonight. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just one quick question. In the redistricting gerrymandering efforts, what sources of information do they use to identify the party affiliations of a particular populace? Do you know?
There are a lot of places where if you are a member of a political party and it's reported, I don't want to tell you, I don't know if it's appropriate to tell you that I tend to consider myself an independent, but in my own home district, I'm listed as a Republican, and I don't know how that happened. I think Eva told me once that it was probably because when we used to have the partisan kind of, when you had to pick a ballot, I must have picked a Republican ballot.
The presidential primary.
See?
That's the one time in Michigan that you have to declare a party.
So I don't remember.
Wait, Eva?
So for years and years and years, but you know, whatever. I like all information, so I stay on it. But they track all that stuff. Those are all above my pay grade.
I've been asked to repeat that in the microphone. Your political party, the one election in Michigan where you have to declare a party is the presidential primary. And not always, but we have in the past. And so when you declared that went into a public record, and the parties know it. And I can tell you today, I got a call from one of the political parties about voting in my local election for candidates of that political party.
And I think, and I might be dating myself here, and it could be my mind is going, but it seems like at one point in history we did actually had to go in and ask for either a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. And I think that might have tipped something. I don't know.
Hi, I don't actually have a question, but I do have the answer that you need.
Do you have an answer? Oh, I love answers.
See, I look at the redistricting as a mathematical process rather than a political one. Although getting the changes, that would be completely political, and that's outside my skill set. But as far as getting them fair, so there's no gerrymandering, that has a simple mathematical solution, in addition to the federal laws that you have to meet. And the rule would be that they have to be contiguous, you have to equal population, and so on. But the rule that makes it you can determine one's fair and one's not, or more fair, is by adding up the perimeter distances for the congressional districts. And anybody can submit a plan. The League of Women Voters, the Democrats, the Republicans, newspapers, college professors. They would go to some part of the state, maybe the Secretary of State's office or an independent commission, and they would look at all of them, check the numbers, and then they would pick the one with the smallest perimeter distance, because that will guarantee absolutely that you get ungerrymandered districts. Now, federal law says you got to do a little bit because of the Voting Rights Act, but still, as long as you meet federal laws, the commission would pick the plan that has the minimum perimeter distance, minimum perimeter distances, no matter who submits it. And it would all be public, it would be on a website, anybody could look at it and check it. Lots of people's eyes would be all over this thing. And if anybody makes a miscalculation, of course, I'm sure there would be a mention of it. So the thing is that once the minimum plan is presented to the public, and everybody can see all the plans and see their relative perimeter distances, the state would be required to take the one with the minimum. Because anytime you gerrymander a district, you put little curly cues and extensions and projections, that always increases the perimeter distance, every time. Basic geometry. As a mathematician and a physicist, I can see that. I always like to get down to the essence of things. But
I think we should put all the mathematicians and engineers and GIS people all in a room and not let them out till they have a plan, but.
I'll give you a copy of it if anybody would like to have it. I brought some copies.
Way in the back.
Yes, you brought up an interesting topic there. California is much bigger than Michigan. It has less representatives. And in order of cost cutting, would it be better to eliminate some of the districts and maybe put everybody into one house and then allow them to vote? We wouldn't have, well, it's the other guy and the other in the Senate or the representative, just have one, they make up their mind. Would we be better off? And it would be a cost savings on top of that, because I know the people in Lansing want to save money.
Perhaps, but if you think about, I mean, the whole point of having representatives and in the size that we have them is so that we actually have people who are supposedly there representing our interests in our little pocket of the world, right? That's the whole point of having them. Because we are diverse.
Another question. You had mentioned the various groups that were involved in looking into the redistricting, like say Common Cause. I've been getting a lot of emails from the Democratic Party and related organizations, but partisan, in this effort for redistricting. Now, what is that? I mean, how does it fit in with independent?
And actually, I just heard about that group last week. So mostly I stay out of partisan politics. In my role as president of any league, you're not allowed to be partisan ever. That's just one of the things we have to agree to. And in my role at the state, I can't. So I purposely kind of like turn a blind eye to it. It's the only way I can keep from getting sucked down that vortex. But I did hear about that group last week. They're out there. There are many of them. In Illinois, where the Democrats have the majority, they're crying for the league's support there because they think it's unfair. So it all comes down to the party that's in the minority. They don't like it. It doesn't feel good to be the person at the bottom of the pile.
Could a party conceivably be a legitimate support for a
No,
independent?
not really.
It didn't seem like it, yeah.
Well, in our discussions, the reality is, do you think if the league and whatever other groups that would be part of a coalition went together with one party, do you think the other party would ever? You know, the whole point is the solution has to be a bipartisan, has to be blind to party and partisan politics if it's going to actually pass and be successful. So we all have to put those blinders on and say, what's right for the people? What's right for the people? She's coming with your mic.
When I was meeting with my state senator a couple of weeks ago at a coffee thing, and I mentioned to him about the redistricting. And he's a conservative Republican, of course. That's the Democrats, you know, and he was completely and utterly opposed to it. The second thing, you mentioned Nolan Finley, and we know where he stands on most issues. Is he in support of this?
You're going to not. I don't read that paper in my neck of the woods so much. So go ahead. I'm going to defer to Eva because
Nolan Finley did write an article, and you had a quote from him in there, you know, basically saying that we needed to do redistricting should be impartial. He did do that. I mean,
So I need to get to my state senator and say, here's a conservative just like you are who's in favor of it.
Well, because the reality is he's an individual.
Yeah.
And he wants his vote to count. I mean, I won't ask you to tell me if you voted today, but today was election day. You know, you talked about it. Oh, see, I had one thing on my ballot, but I went and I voted, by golly. And I'm going to tell you a story. My daughter, who lives down in Dearborn now, contacted me yesterday because she went on Vote 411 and she kept getting an error message. She didn't even realize they had nothing on their ballot. Dearborn Heights did, but not Dearborn. She's going, seriously, I have nothing on my ballot? So that's okay. I said, don't worry, next year will be a biggie.
How did Arizona get it started?
I don't know the history.
How did it begin?
I have a feeling it's going to be something what we've got right now. People got so fed up that because it was a citizen driven. And ironically, and I can't give you, it's somewhere buried in my notes, each of the places where an independent commission has been voted on has varied. Some of them were citizen driven, some were legislative, some were the hybrid approach, where the citizens started initiative and the legislators said, well, we better do something quick before it gets passed, you know. So there's been any number of ways they've passed. It's a matter of what works. It takes an angry mass that says enough, you know, enough. That's what we're trying to find out. Is the math there? You know, we got to make sure you know. People don't understand what redistricting is. Just seems like above their pay grade, and in our busy lives, we don't want to be involved in one more thing of chaos.
In the states that had the redistricting by the independent, they made the changes. Is there any statistics that are saying that there's a greater voter turnout after the changes?
Amazingly, I'm seeing varied results. Because in some of those states too, like Washington has also got vote by mail. So they think they get better voter turnout because they have that. So there's other things that are involved into it, and I've seen the numbers fluctuating. So I haven't sat down. I need to have this gentleman here sit down and do a mathematical analysis for me, I think. The numbers, yeah. The whole point is, it's not just that though. The whole point is, do you feel represented? Do you feel that your vote matters?
But if you feel your vote matters, will you vote more?
It's going to be interesting to see what the young population does, the millennials, in this next election.
You know, you brought up about voting by mail. If we went to no absentee voting, you would get a greater percentage of people out there voting. But again, my senator, very conservative, oh, no. You know, I won't lie. I won't lie about it. I lied for years to vote absentee because I gave me a chance to sit there and study the ballot, which people don't have. Who wants to go stand in that line, have all those people handing you that literature if you don't know who you're going to vote for by then?
I know.
You know,
I'm running the gauntlet, man. I never understand that.
We should have no absentee voting.
Well, there have been a number of bills introduced this year. I think 6 different bills introduced for no absentee, but they've all been introduced by Democrats, and so you know that you haven't seen the light of day.
There are bills that have been introduced, and for instance, by the Secretary of State, Republican Secretary of State, too. So.
She has. Oh, that's true. That's true. There was that one. Thank you for reminding me. But unfortunately, they haven't gone anywhere. So did you all learn something new tonight, I hope?
Is that presentation on the website sometime?
It will be by the end of the month. It'll be at lwvmi.org. And I think that you're streaming it through your local cable, correct?
Well, actually, I want to thank Civic Center TV, which is recording this program tonight. And they will be streaming it online. You can look at civiccentertv.com, and it will be up by the end of the week. So this presentation will be available online, and I assume also on the local cable if you live in the one of the communities in the West Bloomfield Civic Center TV. And I want to also thank, besides thanking Civic Center TV, I want to thank the library for hosting this event. I'd like to thank Linda for coming down from Flint to make this very informative presentation and a very important presentation if we really want fair representation. And finally, I want to thank those of you who are here today and came to hear this. And as you know, when you came in, you got 2 handouts. One of them allows you to indicate that you're interested in learning more, or to indicate the level of interest that you have, and let the league know. And please leave it on the desk at the back when you fill it out. And thank you very much to everybody.